Howdy, neighbors. Welcome to the Homestead today. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And today is election day. So I usually air my Porch Talk videos around 7 o'clock on Tuesday nights. And I've jumped a couple hours early here, allowing the video to play just to remind you, in case you have forgotten to go vote, that now's time to get out there and go vote. If you haven't, you still got time maybe to get out and vote. I guess it depends on what time zone you're in. But get out there and let your voice be heard. And today's subject is, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. You've heard that saying a lot. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I've had some different little stories I wanted to share with you. But also, before we get started, if you'd hit that subscribe button. A lot of folks have asked how they could help us out. And the biggest way to help us is subscribe. Also, when you comment on videos or you give us a thumbs up, all of those helps us be promoted within the YouTube community here. And we certainly appreciate it very much. And I want to say a big howdy, a big thank you to all of our subscribers. Our channel has really grown lately. And it's from people like you that'll hit that subscribe button and want to help us out. I realize there's some folks that watch through Facebook and they don't have a YouTube account, but they watch our videos. That's fine. We appreciate you too. And that I understand all that. Some folks don't want to set up a YouTube account or whatever. But if you do have a YouTube account and you would like to help us out, hey, thank you very much. And we appreciate all of you. And last week's video, excuse me, I had a lot of comments, and in fact, I still have not been able to read all of the comments, but it was a blessing to my heart. And so today's subject, we talk a lot about being prepared and prepping and things like that for different things that are coming along. I believe we're in the last days based upon the Word of God, so what it says about the last days. But in the last days, here, I believe there's a lot of things you got to get your mindset. If you're going to go to battle, if you're going to go do anything in life, the battle is usually won in the mind. And it's either won or lost in our minds. So if we can keep our minds focused and keep our thought process positive, you probably all got loved ones or family members can think of somebody that if you, when they get into trouble, they're like a dog likes to roll around in something dead. I have family members that want to roll around in something like that. They're like hee-haw. You sing that song, bloom, despair, and agony on me. Whoa, if it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Whoa. Did you ever watch Hee Haw? If you did, you know what I'm talking about. But there's people that are like that in our family that will just waller around in their problems and in their troubles, friends, family, whatever. And I just think sometimes if they would get their thought process right, they could fix their problems just probably in their mind. A lot of their problems could be fixed. Also, they say a lot of things that we worry about never actually ever even happen. So if we'd focus on what's most important. And my dad used to tell me, don't worry about something you can't fix. And if it's something you can't do nothing about, you certainly shouldn't worry about that. But I believe we're in the last days. There's troubles ahead. I believe based upon the Word of God. But I also believe that God has promised to keep His people. But we got to keep our minds right. And there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that talks about keeping your mind, excuse me, I think I've swallowed a gnat or something here. But anyway, I just want to say today that I've had people write me letters. This last week I had a couple of people comment, and I tried to print them off because I was going to read these comments of how they overcame adversities. And one lady was telling me that her husband is a minority, and how that he overcame things, bad words he was called and stuff, and how him and his family even have took it in stride, and they laugh about some of the things that people have said about them and to them before. Well, sometimes it's too sad to cry. You could sit around and bawl and squall about it, but would it do any good? I have before had problems. If laying down and bawling and kicking and screaming would have done me any good, I would have done it, but it wouldn't. It'd just been a waste of time. So what I do is get up and do something about it. And this one particular story, she said her husband, a black man, told about how he overcame obstacles, racial problems in his life, and instead of walling around in it and saying, "Oh, gloom, despair, and agony on me," the guy done great, went to college, got a degree. He is a big employee in a big insurance company. How he started out humble beginnings, but he's doing very good now. And she wanted to write a letter and tell about how proud she was of her husband. Not a letter, but a comment. And I thought, bless her heart and bless him. God bless him. I'm so thankful to hear those kind of stories instead of walling around in your problems or in your past or whatever. There's things I've had to deal with in my life that I had absolute nothing to do with, but I had to put up with it and deal with that problem. It was an obstacle in my life, something that I couldn't do nothing about, but I overcame. And you can too. Another person told me how their dad was raised very, very poor, and how he had such a rough upbringing and had to live in a barn, and how he lived off of potted meat was his main food source. Hey, I actually happen to like potted meat, but I would not want to have it as my main food source. But how he survived but later become very successful and even donated, I believe it was $250,000 he was able to donate to a charity in his later years, and some other things that he was able to do. I just thought, man, ain't that something when people have good things. They took lemons and they made lemonade. Sometimes life's going to give you lemons. You're going to get dealt lemons in this old life. And but there's been people that I've known in my lifetime, personally known, that they started off in a bad way, and they started out at the bottom, and they went downhill from there. They never even tried to climb, never tried to walk, never tried to get. But then I've known others that started out with, on the wrong foot, but they ended up on the right foot. They ended up doing things because they got their mind straight. They got it fixed, and they said, instead of whining because life gave me lemons, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to make lemonade. And we see in the Bible, you read the Bible, there's many stories of people that become victorious because they left their faith in God. They had faith in God. They kept and hung on to their faith in God, and they done great and mighty things. And I had a funeral today I went to. One of my cousins, he's from Fayetteville, North Carolina. He'd be like a second cousin, I believe. Anyway, he's probably more like about my dad's age and how we're kin. His mama and my dad's mom were sisters. And I hadn't seen the guy in probably 40 years. I was probably, 9 or 10 year old last time I seen them, but I remembered him. And so they've come back here for his son's funeral. And so it's just his son's not a whole lot older than what I am, but some, and just up and passed away. And it's sad that you see people in these situations through death. Sometimes the only time you see some of your family. But he was telling me about growing up, and his mama would be my great aunt. And anyway, that's all what we've always referred to her as. And I don't get into all the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth cousins removed and all that stuff. But I do believe we were talking about it, and we would be considered second cousins, and him and my dad would be first cousins, if I understood that right. But nonetheless, it's kind of like sometimes you get around, and if you ain't careful, you get checking all your in-laws and outlaws, and you might find out you're your own grandpa or something. But anyway, we got to visit today, and he's getting on up in years, and I didn't get to visit real long, but I enjoyed the visit I had. But he was telling me that his dad died when he was a young boy, and things was very rough financially and things for them, and that his mama brought them back here to Oklahoma, and they had to stay with my dad and his family. And he told me that my grandma, Frances, how good she was to them, that she treated them like they were just like they were her kids. And he said, she's one of my most favorite people is your grandma, which my grandma's been dead for a long time now, for over 50 years before I was born. She died a month before I was born. She died June 18th, and I was born July 18th, so 30 days later. But I've had a lot of good things said about her, and I wished I'd have got to know her. But anyway, he was telling me, he said, your grandma was a very good person, and said she was so good to us kids, said she treated us just like we were one of her own. And my grandma had 12 kids, and he said that house, he said, well, I don't know if I knew the house, the old home place is what we call it. And I said, yes, it's now on this place that we have bought from my folks, and where my dad grew up. But it was just had a couple of rooms, and they had built on a bathroom in later years. But the kids all stayed in one room, and that Granny and Grandpa had a room, and of course they had the living room and kitchen, and all that was kind of one big long deal. It was not very, I say big long deal, it was a little bitty house, and they raised 12 kids plus my cousin and his siblings come. I think he said there was 4 of them, and they plus he said there was always other people around, other kids, and he said my grandma fed everybody just like they were her kids. And my grandparents didn't have any money; they were poor folks. But he said one thing that they did have, when people, they didn't think about money like we do today. Now we wallow around because we don't have any money and whine and moan and groan and everything, want what everybody else has got. And he said they didn't have no money, but he said there was so much joy and love and peace as a family there, and so they had to stay there a while. And my great aunt had to go back where she was from, I guess, and get their stuff and move back here and try to get a place. So he had to stay a while and go to school and things. But he said it was some of the best times in his life. And later, the next year, they got a place down in town, and there his mom did, and they moved there and lived there. In fact, his kids was living there now in that old house of my great aunt's. So, but anyway, he was telling me that how wonderful things were back in the old days. It kind of makes you, even though they didn't have much money, people had a lot of happiness and peace and joy, but they took what they had and they done something with it. And they didn't just wallow around and moan and groan about it. Didn't have television, didn't have electricity and all that, but he said it was some of the best times. And he was telling me how wonderful my grandmother, how good she could cook. And and another guy walked up there, and he said, well, he joined in the conversation. He's an older gentleman, like my cousin, and he was telling about that being out here, and he said they'd be out here, they would ride their horses out and stuff, and said if you were around at lunchtime or supper that my grandma fed you. And it wasn't just her. I've heard that story about all the old-timers around here. If you were around their place and it was time to eat, you just ate. And if you didn't eat, it was kind of an insult thing, that everybody got together and ate, and people didn't, gripe because they didn't have nothing. If they didn't have something, they got out and work. All of my family has always been opposed to being on welfare. And I would say a big part of my family, I'm talking about my aunts, uncles, people like that, my grandparents, they qualified for assistance probably at times in their lives. They deserved to get assistance, and they felt it was bad. My dad was in a car wreck when he was a boy, and a real bad car wreck, and was in a body cast for, I think it was 9 months. In fact, at one time, they didn't think he would ever survive and make it, but my dad did. Well, during that time, they had put him on disability, and I think Dad said that he drawed something like $140 a month back then. And so they told my dad that he would have to be on Social Security disability for the rest of his life, that he'd never be able to work again. But after so long, after he got out of the body cast and got to where he could walk again and stuff, he's in a wheelchair for some time, got to where he could walk and things, my dad went back to work. And as soon as he went back to work, he dropped the disability. You don't hear of that much anymore, but my dad said back in the day it was considered an insult for people to assist you and help. Well, he said if you was able to help yourself, you helped yourself first, and you did all you could. And if there is absolutely no other way, then you depend on the government or handouts and things like that. So I said, well, why didn't you stay with the doctors telling you ought to stay and stuff? He said, I just wasn't raised that way. Well, my dad worked for many, many years. He's kind of crippled, has some walking problems, and I know has ached and hurt a lot through his lifetime. But when he got old enough to retire and to draw regular Social Security, they had asked him about that. They had record where he had drawn way back there when he was like 20-year-old, 19, 20-year-old, something like that. But nonetheless, people just people would do things for themselves, and families got together and they supported each other. And my cousin, one thing he was telling me was how that when he would be in town after they moved into this little town here of Gore, he said they had their place there, and he said he'd be walking down the street with his friends, and said if my aunt seen him, or not my aunt, his aunt would be my grandma, Frances, if she seen him, she would holler at him and tell him, say, Harold, get over here, and come over here and give your aunt a hug. And he said sometimes he would want to kind of act like he didn't know her because he was with his buddies and stuff, and he didn't want to give her a hug in front of all of his friends and stuff. But he said that if he acted like he didn't hear her, she'd get louder, and he'd have to go over and give her a hug. But he said she was, in his lifetime, been one of his most favorite people, and was so thankful to have had her for an aunt. And I know I've got aunts and people that way that I'm very fond of. Some have passed on and went to be with the Lord, but I have thought I've been blessed with a lot of good people in my life. But one thing they always taught me, people in my life, is when the going gets rough, the tough get going, and you do all you can to help yourself. And if life gives you lemons, you make lemonade out of it. This other gentleman I told you had come up and started visiting with me and my cousin, and he said that used to they would take and ride their horses down in town there, and that my would have been one of my great grandmothers that lived in town had a hitching post out front. They would tie their horses up there, and he said they would play Monopoly nearly all night long when he was a boy, and said a lot of the young guys would show up there, and she had kids younger and stuff, so they would all show up there, and or grandkids, I guess they were to her, but said they would play Monopoly, and said that she would pop them popcorn and just really was super nice to them all night long, that she just, as long as they wanted to play Monopoly. I didn't know Monopoly had been around that long. So I was telling Josie the story the guy had told me, and Josie has an old, and I meant to bring it out here today, and I didn't do it, so I apologize, but has an old Monopoly game that her mom had. It's an old, the pieces were different, but they're still the same Monopoly, but they were made different. So maybe sometime in a video I can show you that, but I had forgotten even about her. And I said, that Monopoly's been around. She said, that's an old game. And I thought, boy, I didn't know that it would have been way back there in the day that they played Monopoly. But anyway, people tell about good things that happen, and I love to hear good stories of people that, and the families, how they pulled together in times of tragedy, such as my cousin, losing his dad and having to come here to Oklahoma. There was no jobs, no money, and how families pulled together. And I think in these days we're in the days ahead, we talk a whole lot about like I say, prepping here, having food and water, but having things to be able to help each other. And sometimes that might just be using your hands to assist each other. You know, the Amish are real good about coming together and helping when someone's house burns or something like that, if they're going to build a barn. And I remember back when I was a boy here, my dad was working on our house, and he'd built onto our house. And as a part of that, he decided to re-roof the old part of the house and go all the way across on the new portion that he had built with new shingles. And it was on a Saturday he started shingling the house, carried a bundle of shingles up there. I was too young to help back then. I was probably 8, 9 year old, but I did what I could. If he needed nails or anything, you know, I was a gopher, would go get whatever he wanted me to get. But a guy stopped out there, and then one of my dad's brothers stopped out on the road, and they climbed up there and started helping him. And a guy stopped, and he said, "Hey, do y'all have an extra hammer?" And my dad said, "Yeah, there's an extra hammer laying down there on the ground." And the guy carried up a bundle of shingles and started working. And before I knew it, there was a whole herd of people out here helping my dad put the roof on the house. And they all was visiting and just having a grand old time. And that's the way I'm told that around here it used to be. And in these last days, you know, last days, when I mean last days, troublesome days that we're in right now, whatever you want to call them, it may be that we have to help each other out. You know, nowadays labor is very expensive. People don't like to work, but we may have to work and help each other. But when life deals us lemons, if we'll do what we can with it and turn it around, take something bad, the Word of God tells us all things work to the good of them who love God, who are called according to His purpose. And I believe God works all things out for the better in my life because I'm a servant of Jesus Christ, that He works it all out for me. And I believe He will you too. And anyway, I certainly appreciate you watching today. And I want to give a shout out to the I wrote your name down here, and my mind is getting so bad. Lonnie Howe, the homesteading pastor. And I will leave a link down in the description. If you like old-timey type devotionals, preaching and stuff, he's up in the Carolinas there. And we've become kind of friends there, I feel like. He's sent me emails and stuff, and we've got to visit. And he started a YouTube channel, and he does some little devotionals. He has a little homestead, and I really like hearing his devotionals. And I always, every time I've listened to one of his devotionals that he gives, they're little short ones. They're not big, long-winded things. And I just really get something out of it every time, and I certainly appreciate that. So if you're looking for, if you're a Christian and you're looking for something that's kind of old-timey devotionals, I mean, I know there's the YouTube's full of Christian ministry type stuff, just deluxe, and this is something that I happened across a while back, and I just, that kind of caught my attention, the homesteading pastor. I think there's another one I seen here a while back, the homesteading preacher or something, but this is the homesteading pastor, and so I had wrote it down just to make sure I've got it saved in my favorites on YouTube. But I always look forward to the videos, and I appreciate what he's doing. So if you go over and help his channel out and subscribe, why, he would appreciate it, and I would too. And but anyway, I want to say once again, God bless you. We appreciate you all watching today, and we'll see you next Tuesday at 7 o'clock, Lord willing. We're gone.